we've got to be able to make a difference here with the prevention end of things. So let's talk about housing just briefly. Affordable housing is a family of four spends no more than 30% of its income on housing. I think we all know that that probably isn't the case here very often. When we talk about affordable housing or low income housing, I think at least I have visions in my head of what that looks like. When you look at the fact that California minimum wage is $14 an hour, which would be $28,000 a year. Federal poverty guideline is $26,500. So compared to what we have availability of and what we can get, what landlords can get, that's part of our deficit. Okay, excuse me here. This is just an example. The U.S. median income is almost $80,000, where what we have in LA County is $80,000 is our median income for the county. And I kind of just put down 2 people and 4 people in a household. If you start looking at those numbers, even for someone who is a teacher or a fireman, some of these salaries in order to get into moderate income versus even low income is $75,000 or $94,000 for a family of 4. And for me, when I saw these numbers, I just thought, wow, that's a lot of money to be low income in my head. So it's a difference, made a difference in how I kind of viewed this. If you look at the lowest paying jobs in LA Metro, you're looking at $27,000 to $33,000. And here's a brief list. I mean, these are not, jobs of glory for sure. These are people that are working their tails off and doing a lot of interaction, whether it's physical therapist aides, if you're in the forest, cashiers, hosts and hostesses. These are people that work hard, do a lot of kind of grunt work. And so those are the ones that are going to be challenged to find housing. And also when these evictions start happening in a couple months, they're going to be the ones most at risk of losing their housing. And I think that's where we're going to have to start thinking, what can we do to help? Come on. Sorry about this. Oh my, come on. There we go. So this grid has a lot of information on it, but if you look over here, extremely low income renter households, 34% of this are seniors and 37% of it are people in the labor workforce. So when we start to think about the homeless or who is at risk, these are some people that I didn't really realize were at risk like this. And 76% of extremely low income renter households have a severe cost burden. So they have very little extra income to do much with. Come on. Well, I could bring my computer over to Glenbrook and work on it instead of Robert. Like if that's done, I could just sit there and work on it. Okay, let's just start here with looking at some myths about people who are homeless, can't afford a cell phone or a TV. If they can afford it, they really aren't poor. A lot of these can be received from the government, and that's their connection. That's how they find out if they have housing available. Their access to the internet is free, is at libraries, fast foods, coffee shops. That's why you see them around there. And it was very difficult during the pandemic because they couldn't go in anywhere and they had far less access. And that was something I hadn't thought about until we had a recent seminar, and they were some of the lived experience people were talking about. Just, we had a difficult time, but they did as well because they had a hard time connecting with anyone, and most of their sources of support were shut down. People on the street don't want help. They like that lifestyle. I don't know of anyone who really would like that lifestyle. People who live on the street, their life is cut short by probably 20 to 30 years. And some of them, instead of going to a shelter, they like to stay outside because they are able to keep their pets. They may have a past trauma where they don't want to feel closed in. They could have a serious physical or mental illness that it's hard for them to be inside with so many people. And again, during the pandemic, shelters couldn't take as many people as they had. In almost any of the, especially like in the Redondo Beach, some of their meetings, like the city council meetings, you hear people talking about how homeless people, they're scared. They don't want them by their schools. They're criminals. They're, very nervous and scared of them. The fact is that most people that are homeless would be more likely to be a victim of a crime than to actually commit a crime. They often are targets of gangs, and we need to start looking at them as neighbors in need of shelter and housing, especially young adults that may have been kicked out, and women. Lots of abuse of women on the streets just by the sheer fact that they're female and may not be able to fight off an aggressor. Let's say, well, they just made bad choices. It's easy to say that, and maybe they did, but more often than not, it could have been something that happened physically, or someone escaping domestic violence, or having a severe physical disability, and they aren't able to make ends meet. So then they would go into a day-to-day mode for survival. And it's hard for them to think about getting a job when, there really isn't a secure place for them to be. So with all of that kind of information, our task force went in to create an action policy. And give me a second to pull this up. So I'm just going to hit some of the highlights on this. We took information from many of the existing positions that League has about where they stand on meeting basic human needs or in housing, and kind of put them together in one place because it was so spread out. So of course, we are going to support actions to reduce and eliminate homelessness, both sheltered and unsheltered, throughout the state by supporting equal opportunity for access to housing, no barriers, programs and policies so basic human needs can be met. One of the things to think about is, if you go into an encampment, there's no bathroom usually, there's no place to wash your hands, there's no trash cans. If there's a way for us to support some kind of a managed camp, I was talking to Joan this afternoon, I said, it's almost like having a refugee camp where it's monitored and it's secure, and there are bathrooms and maybe laundry facilities and shower facilities that would help people get on the ground, because we don't have the facilities to house them all at this point. They need supportive services, and that includes everything from job training to physical and mental health. substance abuse, a lot of, I think we see a lot of the homeless who have mental health issues because they are probably some of the most visible ones. And that is scary, especially if it is a very severe situation. But this is one way for them to get help. And I think when it comes to drug abuse and those things, they may not have been involved in drugs before they got on the streets. And if you've been, on the streets for a long time, many of them turn to that to kind of cope as a coping mechanism. Building of shelters. We support an increased stock of affordable housing, educating the public about homelessness, the promotion of cost-effective preventive services, facilities and venues to meet basic needs, getting rid of the criminalization that has happened. I think we've seen this occur in Echo Park and other parts of the state. And it's a careful balance of policing versus, if you give a homeless person a ticket, I don't think they're going to be able to pay it. So one of the things that Redondo Beach has done that has worked well is allowing people who are working with supportive services to then really get rid of some of those kind of, if you keep doing this, we'll get rid of all of these fines that have been put against someone. And I think that's worked out pretty well. There have been some real success stories there. There's crisis management and then policies and programs to provide income assistance. So working around all of these is really what we can look at when we see the situation that we're living in. We are fortunate in the South Bay that we may have homeless, but it's not a Skid Row type situation, but we could definitely help with LA County to do things with Skid Row, or we can just work on educating the public about homelessness. It's something about really looking at what each chapter can do to take on something to move forward with the homeless or that situation. So there's the action policy. So the action policy provided an outline. The toolkit actually gives tools for us. So this is still in a test mode, but we're almost done with it. What we've done is kind of laid out an overview here in the first couple of paragraphs with lots of information behind the scenes, basically on any of these links. And then additional ones as, say, if our chapter really wants to dig in, what can we do? Is it going to Redondo Beach and really supporting the new housing that needs to be built, or fighting where it's being put? Any of these, this is actually an excellent, one of our TaskForce members has been involved with the homeless for 25 plus years. And she actually has written several articles that we have included in the toolkit to help educate and give lots of information about what can we do, because it's hard. I mean, it's a complicated issue and there's lots to learn. So what we've tried to do is pack the toolkit with lots of that type of information. So if you have 15 minutes, or if you have more, there's lots of information here about how California became the housing nightmare that it is. That was a big surprise to me a couple of years ago when I realized that we kind of pushed ourselves into this situation by not creating enough housing along the way. I think at one point they were saying in Northern California, they had 19 new jobs and had only one new unit of housing. Well, if you keep doing that for a couple of years, you're going to run out of housing. So now we've got to figure out what to do. So all of these are hopefully articles that you can read and, get the background information that you need to move forward. We've created a glossary of terms so that you know exactly what bridge housing is versus affordable housing and emergency shelters. We have actually part 1 and 2 of the Mythbusters that came from the South Bay Coalition to End Homelessness is in here. So they did a great job on this. And I think it's something that when we start looking at educating the public, that maybe we could do something with this. Maybe get someone who has been homeless to come and talk. So as we go into advocacy, making a difference, this again is the homeless action policy, which we looked at just a minute ago. And I think one thing that we really need to remember is that people of color are disproportionately represented in California and probably in all the other cities experiencing homelessness. Well, 6.5% of Californians identify as Black or African American. Almost 40% of our unhoused population is Black or African American. We've got Latino Californians. They're least likely to try to use services and access housing through those services because they just really aren't familiar, and it could be a language barrier. So it's really important to realize that as we're looking at this group of people, that they've had very different experiences than us and probably grew up in poverty. And that, when we think about approaching them, that's why we have to look at the lived experiences that they have. We've also created a roadmap. So I really like this part of the task force, this toolkit. So it gives examples. A league concludes it should openly support through public testimony of its leaders the building of shelters or very low income housing. And it gives you kind of the outline of how you can create your, I don't want to call it your fight, but your proposal of why we should be supporting these things in the community. Could also be, the league has been asked to support a coalition of community organizations advocating that mental health professionals partner with police to address confrontations. This reminds me of something that we did a couple of years ago when funds first came available with Proposition H, I think it was HHH, where with that tax, we had money, and our 3 cities actually came together and created a homeless task force that has police and healthcare professionals that go out and work in the community. And I think that's made a difference, and it's gotten some people off the street. So just examples of things that may come up I don't want to say every day, but that's pretty much the way it is. Take a public stance in support of mobile healthcare units that would serve low-income neighborhoods during the pandemic. So it just shows where, all the things that the task force or the toolkit, all of the different positions that would support and give credence to what we're trying to do. There's also examples of letters. Come on. There we go. And I think this is the hardest part. I know as we, at least in the beach cities, we've kind of struggled a little bit with how do we write a letter? We don't want to have any legal implications, but we want to show support. And so we've gotten letters from several of the different leagues. And I think it would be helpful for all of us to know that this is the type of thing that we can write and hopefully make a difference. I keep thinking of you, Grace, of the whole situation, what you were talking about earlier. Would be the kind of letter that we would write to stand behind, why there shouldn't be housing or as much housing in that area that you discussed on the other side of the highway.
Right. They should put spread housing throughout the city instead of just by the freeway. They would basically pile all of the kids into 2 of the 3 elementary schools that have the highest number of kids living with poverty, and then the middle school that has the highest proportion of kids living in poverty. That's not affirmatively furthering fair housing. We're supposed to spread it around.
Yep. And we also used as an example the couple of years ago, we did the housing forum and the homelessness education seminar. And so those are in here. For some reason, they're not opening. It could be, here we go. So this was the program outline of what we did. So hopefully if other people are going to do some kind of an educational forum, just gives them ideas and an outline for how they might go about it. Books and movies. There are, I'm sure most of you have seen Nomadland or the Florida Project. This is an interesting resource. Invisible People TV. I don't know whether you've ever seen it or not, but lots of videos, lots of information and articles. And I think it's a great tool to educate people, because this is all from lived experience. And it's easy for me to talk because I've never been homeless, but to really understand where people are coming from, I think Mark Horvath does a great job on this.
It's interesting to note that Asian Americans are most likely to have experienced homelessness at some point in their lives, but African Americans are most likely to be living on the streets with homelessness. It's because Asian Americans are so concentrated in New York, San Francisco, LA, where we have housing crises.
Yeah. So these are some other ideas for advocacy and action. Support safe parking. We get information about that from the Council of Governments about what LASA is doing. We could support that in our area. Support for homeless shelters. We've done service projects before. So that would be hands-on service. I know there have been, the ACLU pulled together a group of lawyers to help with evictions, just ways to educate the public, writing op-eds, participate in the point in time counts. Arnett and I did that a couple of years ago, and it was really interesting. I think Roz was there. There were a couple of other folks that did that. And it's a strange thing to do, to go out to see if you can find homeless people and count them. But you start to see where they feel safe and where they hide. And while it's very sad, it is also, it opens your eyes. This is also good, I think, to have reliable sources. There's so much that goes on. And it could be that we just are not really certain of whether a source is good or not. So we just have pulled together a list of sources that you can feel safe with getting information from. And then if you have questions, or if you really want to get more involved, we have a listserv right here, where we send out articles and other information occasionally. We don't inundate you every day, at least not yet. And then if you have questions or you want to discuss anything, we've got our own email now. So that is kind of the overview of the toolkit. So I'm going to go fast through these because this is, I cannot figure out.
Are we seeing
What?
those little houses being built in Redondo Beach? The tiny houses?
The pallet homes or
Yeah. Yeah, pallet homes. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think of them?
I've heard a couple of good things about them. We had one or two people who were homeless in Manhattan Beach who were moved there. But I'm also curious, I came in late, so I wasn't sure what Grace was chatting about with Redondo and the problem. Was this housing or something else?
It was about where we're going to put, in the next 8 years, the housing plan. There is a certain number of houses that need, or units that need to be built, and they're trying to figure out just where those will go. And right now they're concentrated in an area that is not, guess you would call not very user friendly. You know, they're all,
Yeah.
you know, not healthy air, not safe.
Every denser project that will have low-income units will be put at the edge of the city, the very edges of the city. Like 160 will be put in South Redondo on PCH at the border of with Torrance. And then over 2,000 will be put in North Redondo, 1,000 something at the little triangle by the freeway, cut off from another 1,000 will be put at Galleria right on Hawthorne and Artesia. And they even want to put 77 units on top of the Walgreens that sits in that little triangle, bounded by Artesia, Hawthorne, and Redondo Beach Boulevard. They really think that. And not only that, North Redondo schools are overcrowded already because we've done the infill and South Redondo hasn't. So they're saying the kids don't have to go to North Redondo. I mean, they don't have to go to Redondo schools. They can just walk across the street to go to Centinela High School. Like some other school district is going to take our kids.
Sure. Well, I think we're going to see a lot more of that happening because no one wants to build the RENA numbers. Every community is going to struggle with that. We're going to have these evictions coming soon, and we've got to figure out, when I say we, collectively, the community, how do we help prevent all those people falling into homelessness? We know some will, but how can we do that stopgap? We know that there's more federal and state help coming. There's dollars coming, but right now, because of the encampments that have formed over the last year, and they're fairly large, like the one that was in Echo Park, communities want their parks back. People don't have a place to go. There's going to be this push-pull until we can figure out, where is home for these people? Because right now if you clear them out of a spot, you may put them in a hotel. And that's kind of what they did. I think they put almost 200 people in a hotel for a month, and they can help to get them permanent housing. But even with vouchers, I think the average wait time may be between I want to say 5 and 8 months. So if you don't have the housing for them to go into, I think that's where we're going to have some creative solutions, and why we are seeing people suggesting, oh, well, maybe we take this parking lot and it may be by the water, but we can create a safe encampment there. Or where can we put people that we can help manage that and get support going for them so that we can get them into some kind of housing. The pandemic's been really difficult for all of us. And I know now that we can go outside and be around people, we're going to see more of what's been happening. And I think people are impatient and they want stuff to happen. And I think we can figure out, as we see what's happening in our individual areas, how we can help and how we can make a difference. I'm going the wrong way again. I really liked what Mark Ridley Thomas, he had a quote from earlier in the year. Government has to recognize that it has an obligation to lift the homeless up, not chase them around, not to incarcerate them, but to lift them up and restore them to a place of dignity that they deserve. And that, to me, kind of goes back to that people-centered language of trying to equate everyone is equal, and these people may not have money, but how can we take care of them and look at it as a hand up, not a hand out. I know that there's some discussion that, and this is a statewide number I saw, was 46,000 people for Project Home Key. But that's going to take a lot of work to get those places together and get people moved into them. And that's still, a third of the people that we have in the state. So it's going to take throwing everything at this issue, because we're going to need all kinds of different answers.
If the infrastructure bill passes, we're getting money anyway, but there'll be a lot more money coming.
Yeah.
And, people can go to work, finally be put to work in building these sites,
Yeah. I don't know whether you saw in the paper on Sunday, there was an article about how several of formerly homeless people were doing cleanup at a couple different shifts on Skid Row. And it's that type of innovative kind of thinking of, let's get people working to help the situation. We've got Judge Carter, who's talked about, let's move Skid Row, in 6 months. And I think those of us that have been involved in it's like, gosh, I wish we could, I just don't know where they're going. I think there's some hope that some of the commercial developments that are empty could be transitioned into housing, but that takes some work and some energy. And so it's just going to take a little bit of time to make that kind of thing happen. So we've got a list of references. We will be able to post this. I think we're going to plan to post it on the Facebook site. We can do both the presentation and the recorded version of this. But what questions do we have?
Yeah, I have a question. Yvette, are you working with LASHA, the Los Angeles County Health Association, Homelessness Association?
It is definitely involved in what we're doing. What we do in the South Bay is there is a group called the South Bay Coalition to End Homelessness that is the integrator of almost, all of the people that are supplying services. So the Council of Governments also has a group that deals with homelessness. Harbor Interfaith, that's in San Pedro, is kind of the lead group for our continuum of care. And they are able to, help with whatever needs to happen, depending on what the issue is. So we have monthly meetings where we get together and we're talking or hearing what's happened. We get lots of information from LASA and from NAMI, the mental health group. And it's great information to have, but as the support group that we are, an educating group, it's okay, these things are going on. How can we kind of tie into that to help in the community? Where's the biggest issue? And it had been, we needed those outreach people, so that those homeless plans were terrific to get the outreach people and help get the folks that we have in the South Bay help. But what they ran into was there are no beds available if we get someone and they want to have help, there's no place for them to go. So that's part of what the cities are working on, is
Yeah.
how do we do that? And that's one of the reasons that Redondo came up with its pallet homes, along many other things, of trying to give people a place to be and a community. And through that, they have a program where several of chronically homeless people have been going to a court every month and making their way through, doing everything that they need to get housing, to get help if they have substance abuse, and to get their paperwork. I mean, you don't realize how much paperwork is needed to try to get housing. And I know they're just starting this process, just like they've just created the homeless database. And that is going to help show how much work is really being done, because I think all the groups were not getting
Accurate
everybody's like, what's happening? And now they can actually show how many touches they've had, how much they've been doing. And I think that's important to have that data to be able to say, hey, we've worked with, 250,000 people this year, and we've gotten 91,000 of them housed, but there's still others there that need help, and we don't have enough space for them.
Teri, are there, we referred to all the various levels of homelessness. Is there a way of quantifying data-wise, like the people that have the need but need the fewest services? I'm thinking of families who just have, fixing the car has left them without being able to get to work, without getting kids to school. That group to me seems like might be a much easier fix than someone who's chronically on the street, dealing with mental health issue, dealing with drug issue. And I guess one of the statistics is the longer they stay on the street, the harder, it becomes a lifestyle. Excuse me. So, it seems like if there were a leveling of care, that it would make it somewhat more manageable in terms of how you deal with them, and the amount of resources, may need to be devoted to each of these different levels. So that's one of my questions. The other thing I wanted to say on education is that, having been in the schools, students who are homeless can go wherever they want. There's no barrier. So thinking that, typically you would want to go someplace close to where you are, especially if transportation is an issue, but it doesn't have to be like that. They may be homeless in South Bay, and they may be from Westchester or something like that, for the kids in Westchester. So they may be still trying to schlep the kids to their home schools. So there is kind of an open season generally on that, but logistics may fall into here too.
I saw a presentation to your earlier point from LASA, and this was maybe 2 months ago, where they basically have realized what you were just saying. The chronically homeless, that 20 to 25% that have been homeless for more than a year take so many resources. It's hard to dig out of that. But there's that middle group that have kind of been there, but then there's that group, like you said, that just needs the car fixed, or just needs somebody to pay their rent this month because they're waiting for a check to come in, or something like that. And that prevention group, that one slide, that whole prevention thing, they have realized that they need to do more there. In the bibliography that's inside of the toolkit, which I failed to show you, we have probably 10 different topics and 10 articles under each one of them. And one of the articles that we found was, I think it's some university in Northern Cal that is trying to figure out how to identify what are those of 10 people that are on the edge of homelessness. 4 of them are going to fall into it. Which 4 are they? And that's going to take a while to figure out, but there are people trying to get at that, because I think they see exactly what you're saying, that prevention piece is the easy part to keep them.
schools could actually help with identifying some of these families, especially too. I know in Torrance, we had a office that dealt with the students that were homeless. And again, that, as you pointed out, that can be anybody from who actually is living on the street to somebody who's got a voucher and living in a motel to somebody who's couch surfing or hold up with relatives. So those are all identified in education as homeless. But I know having families where, you know, one of the parties was paying child support and family support, and then they decided they didn't want to do that, and they were in this limbo of waiting to see how this was going to hold out in court, or how it happened in court. And in the meantime, they had to pay the rent, and they found themselves on the street. Well, that doesn't seem like that's a complicated fix.
It's not.
So I think, you know, when you have to triage, you know, fixing the problems that you can identify and fix starts to make it more, get your arms around it a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I think that's one of the things that's so off-putting, I think, for a lot of people is, how do you do this, you know?
Yeah. And I think that was one of the things that happened when we started getting the sales tax money a couple of years ago. Everyone was operating on the shoestring, and all of a sudden they had an influx of money, and it was like, oh my goodness, we don't have enough people to manage what we need to do. We've got to I think they took 18 months to really figure out, okay, how are we going to get our arms around it? And it's an evolving process. So now we've got this going, and what else? We're getting additional funds. How are we going to, you know, there may be a whole section that all they do is deal with the evictions, because that's going to be huge. And it's going to be one of those things where, how can we get them to stay in the home so that they don't become homeless? And is it easier to pay for their rent for a year than to deal with a family on the street and all the trauma that's there? So that's part of the discussion of how do we manage.
And there's no real data here either. I mean, to what works, what doesn't work. So there's not enough information to go on. And one of the questions I typed in on the chat was, are there communities who have actually successfully, to some extent, dealt with this? We have such a huge problem in California.
Yeah.
And because of things that we haven't done. But
there are several cities in California that have done great jobs, but their numbers are not as high as what we have to deal with. And I think that's LA's, you know, big issue is we just have so many homeless. And whereas, you know, Stockton or Bakersfield or some of those other smaller cities, what they've done is they get to know the person, and they figure out, you know, where they can go and where they can be placed and what they need. Is it just an apartment, or do they need to have health services? And we can do that. We just don't have enough case managers and places for them to go.
And they keep coming. You know, I know
They do keep coming.
in Santa Monica, where they've always, people who are unhoused have been part of the scenery forever. And but when it was more manageable, you knew who those people were. I mean, you might be able to call them by name.
Exactly.
You know, where now it's just become such a huge problem. Even in Santa Monica, they can't get their arms around it.
Yeah. No, they keep, and they know, I mean, Santa Monica and Venice, NIMBYs are really talking about, well, if you offer the services, then they're going to come. You're just going to have more people, but it's, I don't know whether it's that simple.
It's some of it is, I think, but it also is, the weather's nice here. I mean, if I have to live outdoors, am I going to live in Pittsburgh or am I going to live in California? Not that they're flying out here for it, but I mean, if you have a choice, where are you going to be?
I think what the numbers that we have would say 70 to 80% of the people that are here are living fairly close to where they became homeless. Okay. So it's not like we're getting, there may be some of that, the kids that come and try to make it, in acting or whatever, that end up on the street. But I think that's a much smaller percentage. There are some.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
most people stay where they where they were last housed. But what I was going to say is that in LA, our homeless are out on the streets, and in New York and in the Northeast cities, they're required to house them indoors. People can choose to stay in the Northeast where their emergency shelter will be indoors, instead of out here where they have to live in a tent. I would think that the incentive runs for people to flee here if they could.
Yeah. Well, and I do know that if someone's looking to, they've been working with an outreach person and they have relatives that are in Arizona or in South Carolina, that they will sometimes work to get a plane ticket or a bus ticket to get them to their family. It just, once again, it's every case is a little different.
But I know I pay attention because I was briefly homeless when I was a tween, when my mom first left my dad. And then and San Francisco Silicon Valley being so expensive, there's no way, even with my mom and her job, that we could get a rent deposit down and secure a place to live. And so when caseworkers go through and they do this triage, there are people who think that it's wrong that people who are easy cases, like my mom, she has a job and none of her kids, her kids are healthy, that we would jump the queue over people who've been waiting longer. But in some ways, it actually makes more sense, because if we were left out on the streets, we would have developed mental illnesses. So all my mom needed was the deposit on an apartment.
Yeah. And I think we're going to be getting some data from those continuums of care as they start putting their information together, which will be helpful to figure out how, where we need to spend our energy, as well as they are trying to consolidate some of the housing paperwork and put it online and try to get it consistent between all the different channels for housing. And I think that will help as well, because you get all the paperwork done and somebody loses your paperwork and then you've got to recreate, and it's a lot of time spent where it could be better spent than tracking that. So the money is helping to automate things and hopefully to give us more data, better data. Joan, is there anything in the chat?
I think actually, one question was, would a strong project room key program help the venues as well as find housing for those in need? With the pandemic, I would expect many venues have space and need the revenue.
Yes, I agree. They were hoping, I want to say the number was they wanted 10 to 15, 10 to 12,000 units, because there were so many empty hotels. And I think they got 8 statewide, maybe. There was about 3,000 to 4,000 that was in LA County. And so that was the largest amount of homeless to be sheltered that quickly. And one of the things that they heard was that they ran it so secure that you felt almost like, I don't want to say that you were in prison, but it was very restrictive. They brought your food, you could go in and out. A lot of the neighborhoods were not very happy about having homeless people in the hotel. And that was, it's surprising. No one's going to be happy with, I should say very few people will be happy that there's a hotel that is being converted to house formerly homeless people, but it is a step up, and to get a roof over their heads and to kind of move forward just to get that stability. I think they are really focused on doing, they being the state, trying to really do the project Home Key, which is, I know they've converted some of the hotels in the LA area to become apartments for people. And they'll be run a little bit differently than the project Room Key, which I think will be good. But that still takes time. I think it was, Grace, we noticed that there was one hotel that they had emptied out, and that's because they were trying to renovate it. And buying those hotels and those hotel rooms is, a good option. It's just how many will sell, and people still get upset when they know that how it's going to be used. So that's one of the things that we can do as league, is to support that activity.
Yeah,
Well, Teri,
Yeah.
Arnett, I'm, always concerned about the human factor. And I love the effort to, excuse me, to make it more in terms of the verbiage used to refer to homeless people, people, not their condition so
Yeah.
much. But is there anything in the toolkit that, kind of addresses? I mean, I look at the people here, and I know everyone in the league has homelessness as a priority or on their mind. We're aware of it, and we have a humane attitude toward it, I think. But is there anything in the toolkit that addresses like public education for this? You go to the council meetings, and you just see the NIMBYs or people who just are so vehemently opposed. I mean, I've just heard such nasty language. I mean, just a complete ignorance whether of the fact that these are human beings that we're talking about.
Yes.
And is there something in the toolkit to address like public education?
That's a really good point. I think what we have is some of the information from like our forums that we did. And I know other people have done them as well, but I think that type of thing. And there's also, you can join, they talk a lot about being observers and really paying attention to the homeless stuff that's going on in the area. And then I think from that, we could create almost our own group of talking about things and how we can address things at a kind of a city level. But as you know, from what you've seen in the past, I mean, I've seen it several different ways, and Grace has seen it, also in Redondo Beach, but we went to support PATH when we first started getting involved in this, and PATH said, oh, I think we're going to have about 80 people oppose us for this West Carson permanent supportive housing.
Oh, I was there. I remember that.
Yeah. Oh my God. They had 400 people, 7 sheriffs. I mean, it's crazy. People go crazy. And I think that's where we need to be supportive as league.
Teri, I know Iris said that she was never coming with me again. She was terrified.
Deborah, Deborah, did you have a question?
I did. I wanted to ask if you know how they handled food when they use a hotel. Is there a coordinating agency that works on that?
Yes. So it depends on what service provider area. We're service provider area 8. So there's 8 different groups, kind of like what we have with the Harbor Interfaith, and then they coordinate with different groups to get the food in and bring it in so that people don't have to go out. But I think what
The LA food bank.
imagine
the LA food bank feeds a lot of people in the hotels.
Yeah.
There was a good LA Times article about that, and how one of the women got hired to bring the food to the door, to deliver them to the doors of the formerly homeless in her building. So, and then she ended up getting a job as a manager at one of the supportive housing places.
One of those good stories.
Yeah.
So Rita Crabtree Camp had a comment that SHARE is a collaborative housing. I don't know, Rita, if you want to talk about this more, but she says it's a great resource to help get people off the street quickly. Are you familiar with SHARE?
I'm not.
Oh, I can speak to it for a quick minute if you want.
Yeah.
Share Collaborative Housing shares in Culver City. And it's actually stands for self-health and recovery, experience, I think. Can't remember, sorry. But anyway, they have a collaborative housing office. I went through advanced peer specialist training there, and then I worked in the collaborative housing department as an intern for a year. What they do is their philosophy is that people to be in an apartment alone or with just one other person, it can be very isolating. But to be as a part of a family, to be in part of a group, can really provide you with that support support group, similar to a family. And so they rent homes that are on the market. They cold call houses that are on the market. It has to have a yard. It has to have a separate dining area. And then they place 2 people per bedroom. So you have a roommate. And there's no questions asked. There's no first or last month's rent. There's no questions about whether you've been incarcerated or homeless or anything. I got somebody in there who was about to be homeless. She was getting kicked out by her parents. And she called me and we got her into a room. And then the landlord provides everything, a computer, internet, furniture, everything that you can imagine. So all you're paying, if you're paying, you pay between $550 and $900 a month, and all you're paying is your rent. You pay for nothing else. You don't have to pay for anything else. You have to buy your own food. That's all you have to do. And it comes with a peer bridger. So a person with lived experience that manages the house. So if you're having an argument with somebody, or if you as a house want to plant a garden, you might have a house meeting once a month. If you have a problem with the landlord, you call the peer bridger and they will help you work through things. If you want to look for jobs or get job training, they'll help you find the resources that you need to get to. And they're all over LA County in almost every neighborhood you could imagine.
I think that's great. I love hearing that.
Yeah, it's a really
Very cool. Yeah. How many people are in the program?
In the Share Collaborative Housing?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. They have placed hundreds, if not thousands. MB Safe, which is a 501c3 I am part of. We, in the last 7 months, have housed 9 people.
That's great.
It happens quickly, and anywhere from 2 to 3 days to about 10 days. But and that it's a really good program to help people get off the street so they could start to think about what they want their goals to be for the future.
So does it have supporting services
so
to help them with job training and all that?
So what they do is because in the beach cities here, every person that, like for example, every person that MB Safe helped, Harbor Interfaith is directly involved with them as well. So they will work with the job training and the CES and everything that you need. Education. We have one girl who's looking into going to El Camino College right now.
So Grace Farwell actually posted on the chat box the website for shares. If people want to copy it out of there, they can. So a question is could we get a copy of the slides?
Yeah.
And so Teri,
I think we can either post them on the website. I think we talked about posting it on Facebook, our Facebook site, so that anyone can reach that. We'll do that as well as the presentation tonight, the recording.
Okay, actually, I think that's pretty much all of the questions. So unless there are any more.
If we could do that email too, because I could forward a lot of things to people that maybe that won't see our Facebook. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Teri, we owe you a huge round of applause
Oh,
for several years of work and a great presentation tonight.
Well, I can't wait to see what different groups do with what we have, because that's really what it's all about, is really now taking it and making it actionable.
And so I think we're all being challenged to do something. And so hopefully people will give it some thought, and for our local league or beyond, we should think about what the next steps are. And just a reminder for people to put on the calendar, June 22nd, we're going to have another Zoom meeting, but this one is going to be Dr. Donna Benton, who's on the governor's California Master Plan for Aging Committee. And so she's going to be giving us her perspective on that new master plan. And so it's going to be a very interesting Zoom meeting, June 22nd. And thanks to everybody for attending. Does anybody have any last words?
Book club on Thursday.
Book club on Thursday.
Great book.
Yes.
Grace, do you want to tell everybody what the name of the book is?
I don't have the book in front of me. Does anyone, it was
Life
Life
After-
After Manzanar.
Life and After Manzanar. And it's a quick read. I mean, you could read it in a few days.
Yeah, in a couple
did.
evenings. It's by Lorraine Lindquist and Naomi Hirahara, and she is the immediate past publisher of the Rafu Shimpo that they mentioned at the beginning.
And if you go to the Beach Cities Facebook page, it's posted on the calendar.
It's posted on
Thank
Milo
you.
too.
And so thank you to Jennifer. Thanks, Jen.
Sure.
Yeah,
All right.
it's a great book because then you like there's so much stuff about our local area. You learn a lot of local history too.
All right. Thanks, Teri.
Thanks, everyone.
Everybody.
Thank you, Teri.
Thank you,
Bye.
Teri.
See you
Bye-bye.
guys. Bye. Thanks for being here.
Bye. Thank you.